Nice. Okay, so we're ready to start looking at our next learning plan, which is going to be on extrusions. So we started out with Sketcher, which makes sense, kind of get used to creating that profile so that now we can do something with it. And the first thing we can do with it is we can create extrusions, okay? So, so learning plan 3 is all about extrusions. So if we go into learning plan number 3, there are some lecture videos out here, okay, but I'm gonna record some new ones, and we'll make sure that you get the information that you need. I'm gonna first do kind of an overview of extrusions. We're gonna use our book as our guide. There are no PowerPoints for this particular chapter because I end up defaulting to the book all the time. So it seems kind of silly. I can just turn the page and look at the next illustration, then do a PowerPoint. But then you do have a homework assignment here. So if I click on the homework assignment, there's actually 2 things that you need to do. You're going to be working through 2 tutorials that are in the book, okay? Oh, it says chapter 3. It's not chapter 3, it's chapter 4. I'm so sorry. I'll get that updated. But then you have drawings. There are 6 drawings that you are going to be doing, maybe 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, no, 6. Okay, 6 drawings that you're going to be doing. Now, for the tutorials, those will be right out of the book, and it's chapter 4, not chapter 3. It's learning plan 3, chapter 4. I'm sure that's where I got that crossed over from. But the drawings themselves are not from the back of this chapter, okay? So when I used the previous book, it had a little bit different problems at the end of the chapter, and they have them numbered wrong, okay, or different than what they were before. And I didn't want to redo all the videos that I had from the original time I did it, because I'm going to say it, they're good, you know, they're good videos and they go along with the problem, but they're mislabeled now at the back of the book. So what I did was I created a handout, and that handout is the PDF in the LP3 drawings here, okay? So if you look at the numbering for this assignment, it coincides with the handout, not the back of the book. Some of these drawings are in the back of the book, and some of them aren't anymore, and are in the back of the chapter. So I just made a handout for it rather than trying to change the numbers and all that kind of stuff. This way it's consistently with the videos that I created in the past that are good videos that still are applicable, and they go along with, you know, these problems here from this chapter 4. Okay, so just know, handout. Don't look to the numbers in the back of the book. There is a 4-1, but it is not a holder block. Okay, so use the handout with this information, and this is going to then correlate with what the video is and what I want you to hand in. Okay, so that's kind of something that's just a little different. It's the same authors of the book, it's the same publishers of the book, but they came out with the new version for Creo 8 instead of Creo 7. And then this is the first time where I noticed, oh no, the homework problem numbers aren't the same. So instead of trying to fight with it, we'll just adjust. So use the handout here for your homework assignment on the drawings. The tutorials are exactly the same pages, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath my camera, and we're first going to open up our book to chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 4 is all about extrusions. So again, learning plan number 3, but chapter 4. So not to confuse you, but it's just kind of the way it worked out. So extrusions are where we're going to now take those profiles, those sketches, those 2D sketches, and we're going to give them depth. Okay, so in and out of the screen here. All right, we're going to add material, give it depth. So as we look on the following page, on page 76, there's kind of a progression here and some choices that we can make when we build something. Now, first and foremost, our method of building the part should be consistent with what we believe the design intent to be. And sometimes the profile, how we create it, then affects, as we know, how it's going to perform later on. So if you know that there is a certain dimension that could change or could be critical to the design, you want to be sure that you design that into how you make your sketches. Okay, so for instance, a couple ways that we can create this block is we can sketch the profile like we see it here, kind of like an upside down T, and then using that profile, we can then extrude whatever depth we want it to be, right? And then add any other features, in this case, the holes. Or we could look at this very same block and do the base first, extrude that, then we can add the piece on the top, extrude that, and then put the final holes in. Or a third way we could look at this is we could add the upright portion and then put the 2 feet on either end. Now, all of them will get us to the same final result. One might be a little bit more efficient than the others, but it comes down to the design intent. Okay, it comes down to design intent. If you know absolutely that something like, you know, these two feet are going to be, changing on a regular basis, maybe doing it this way might be the way you want to do it. Or if you know that the thickness of the base is something that, okay, I have a family of parts, I can make this part in 34 different ways. So I want to be able to always change this, value. Maybe you build it like that then. Okay. So design intent is going to be the driver for which method you do, even though you're getting to it, in a couple different ways. It might be based on efficiency. It might be based on design intent. So sometimes you can approach the problem differently. Okay. So there's not going to be one necessarily right way to do it. Okay. Now there's a couple examples here, a very kind of informal tutorial that I'm going to do with you guys. Now this isn't so much a step-by-step here, but I'm going to kind of show you the features of and the process to go through. So what I'm going to do, and this is not intended for you to necessarily follow along with, but you can if you want to. There are going to be a couple formal tutorials in the pages that are after this. But what we're going to do is we are going to build this part right here. Okay, I'm going to kind of demonstrate building this part. And they start over here with the dimensions of the base. Now, they can kind of leave some things off, and that's why I'm using this more as an informal demonstration as opposed to a tutorial that you would go through. But again, if you want to follow along with me, that's totally fine. So I'm going to start first by going into Creo, and I already have it up and running here for me. Okay, and I already closed out of the stuff. I set my working directory, so I'm really all set to go here. Now, I'm going to start new, just like I have been, up until this point. But this time, I am not going to go into Sketch, okay? I'm going to go into a part. I know that I'm going to add depth now. I'm going to do more than just sketching. I'm going to use those sketches to then make features, all right? So I'm going to go into a part, and I'm going to give it a name. And I forget what this is called. I don't know if it's called anything. Block. Block. I think it's 15703. So we're going to call it block 15703. I don't think I can have any capitals. I think I'm going to put it in. Forget all their little rules. Okay. And then we come up with our familiar kind of intersection of our planes. And now we want to decide what plane we're going to be on. Now, if I go back to the book over here, I am going to be creating this base. So if I look at my part over here, and I kind of established that this is probably going to be my front view, that means that I'm going to be looking down on the base. So drawing on the top plane is going to make sense, right? So I'm going to select the top plane as my sketching plane for this base. Okay. So that means that I'm going to just kind of go over the top of one or two of these. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I do this, sorry, I'm thinking ahead. We have a choice. We can go into Sketch or we can go right into Extrude. If you remember back from SolidWorks, if you've had that before, which you probably have, you will remember that you can go straight into a function, and it's going to start off with, if you don't have anything drawn yet, it's going to start you off with a sketch because it needs a sketch first before it can do it. And Creo is the same way. It knows if I hit extrude, it's not going to go right into an extrude function because I have nothing to extrude yet. I first have to sketch. So whether you go into Sketch first and start sketching, or if you go into extrude saves you like a step. All right, or maybe one or two clicks. So now I'm in extrude, and this is where it's saying to me, you got to define for me where you're going to draw. What plane do you want to draw on? Okay. So you'll notice that this placement tab is here. And I need to define the placement of where I'm going to start. And so I'm going to hit define, and the box over on the right-hand side comes up, and you'll notice that there's this like greenish place where it wants to fill something in. That's what I want to click over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gonna kind of hover over, not click, until I find the plane that I want. And I want to be on this top plane. So when this is activated, I'm going to click it. And then it kind of puts a reference axis in here. This is the right plane. And so that's totally fine. We're just going to do the standard here. And then I'm going to hit sketch. And now notice, as long as you have that configuration set up, it's going to automatically adjust. You kind of saw it kind of slow-mo, like adjust to my screen. Now, if you don't have that configuration set up, then I'm going to just point you to File, Options, and then we're going to go to Sketcher. And you want to make sure that down here, about 3/4 of the way down, Sketcher Startup, make the sketching plane parallel to the screen. It saves you a click. If you don't have that, then there is on the toolbar here, there is Sketch View. And if you click Sketch View, it will do this for you. It just saves us a click if we do it right away. All right. So there we have it. Now we have the intersection, kind of our 0, 0 of our screen. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to draw that rectangle. So I'm going to go up here. Notice that we have our sketch ribbon open. And these are all the familiar commands that we had from our previous learning plan. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I could do a line. I could go line and create a rectangle around there, or I could be a little bit more efficient and use the rectangle command. Rectangle command, I'm going to do like opposing corners for my rectangle. So I'm going to start at the 0, 0 here, snap to it, and then I'm going to come down and to the right. Now, I don't know why, but Creo, if I would put a rectangle about this size, it's going to be humongous. Okay, so and I'll do that, and I'll right or middle mouse button. I'm at 202 units. All right, that's really big. So I'm gonna do an undo here. What I tend to do here is I tend to zoom in. So I'm rollering toward myself kind of a bunch of times, okay, until I'm like nice and close. And I'm gonna do the rectangle now. Rectangle here to here. And then I'm gonna middle mouse button. And now I'm at least at 24 and 12, okay? If I'm at 200 and 300, and I need this to get down to like a dimension of 2 and 5, well, then when I put my new dimensions in, it just becomes like so small and it's hard to read. So I zoom in a bunch of times and get in there so that it's not too large of a difference. So now I'm going to change these numbers. I'm going to double click. This is going to be my 5-inch dimension. And the height is going to be 2 inches. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this to the screen for that left side. And when I click out, you'll notice that I have 2 black dimensions, which means that we say in SolidWorks fully defined, right? But in Creo, they call them strong dimensions, okay? I'm good. Now, to check if you're ready to extrude, because actually I'm not ready to extrude, I have to add a radius before I do that. But if I wanted to check to see if I okay here, you can always, if you see all green check marks when you do feature requirements, you're good to go. But before I do extrude, okay, I do need to put this radius on the front side here, this radius on the front side. And I'm going to put that in as a fillet, okay? So I've got a fillet command right here, and there are options underneath, okay? But I'm just going to use the standard circular fillet, circular fillet, and I'm going to grab one of the lines and then the other, and it's going to put it in there for me and assume a dimension, okay? Now, once I middle mouse button, I can double click on that dimension and change it. So the middle mouse button kind of sets it, right? Ends the command if you would. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to put my dimension in here. So my dimension for that radius is 1 inch. And I'm just going to put 1, enter, and it adjusts the size. Okay, I'm going to click out over here. And because I added that dimension, that's a strong dimension as well, the 2-inch dimension went over here. Okay. Now, I don't know why we got rid of that. 2, I'm just going to hit 2, enter. Should be okay. I will say something about Creo is at times, do this. At times it won't change the color here, but if I go to feature requirements, everything is okay. And then if I close this and I go back in, I will tell you that sometimes it like automatically turns for me. So I'm going to go ahead, and now that I have my sketch, if you would, fully defined, I have all strong dimensions. I know that 2 is strong. I'm not worried about it, and I can confirm that by feature requirements. If there was something wonky, that something wasn't fully defined, I would have like a yield sign or a red, something in there giving me warnings. And I'm totally good. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm totally good. I know I'm good. So I'm going to hit OK. Once I hit OK, this remembers that I was in extrude when I went into sketch. So now instead of having to go back out and then hit the extrude button, now it just says, oh yeah, that's right, you were in extrude, from when we went in. Now, this is like SolidWorks, where it kind of shows you straight on that plane, but it doesn't give us a really good view of which way it's changing. So if you use your middle mouse button and you hold it and then you just rotate a little bit, you're going to get that thickness, okay? So this is how you can kind of see which direction is it actually moving in. Now, if there is something important about which way, like for instance, from the plane it's going, if you want it on the left or the right, which makes sense to you, you can change that, okay? And you can change that by simply either toggling this, okay? Or you can do it up here where we see the depth dimension. You can toggle it back and forth there as well, okay? I'm just going to leave it in where it kind of assumed we were starting, which is totally fine. And then you'll notice that we have an option here for depth. You'll notice that there is that little triangle down below. So what that means is that we have options here, okay? Now, since this is our first extrusion, we don't have a through all, right? Because it's going to be whatever the dimension is. There's no other features there. So what Creo will do, it'll only give us options when they're appropriate. Okay, it's kind of smart that way. So we're going to do just the regular depth here, and we're going to put like what we call a blind depth in. So our blind depth, it doesn't give us the thickness in this example. Again, it's kind of an informal tutorial demonstration. We're going to give it a 1/2 inch and then enter. So it should automatically do it for us. Now, before we officially say okay, Creo says, do you want to look at it? So these little glasses here are like a preview of what the final part is going to look like before we officially hit the OK. All right. And if you like it, you can just go ahead and hit OK. And here I am. OK, here I am. OK, cool. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down and dragging my middle mouse button. And you'll notice that I'm, kind of orienting it here. OK. So now what I want to do, if we go back to this part, okay, I got my base identified. Now I want to add in this, this top portion right here. So we are going to pick our sketch plane, and we're going to then sketch on that sketch plane. So I'm gonna actually look at my part. Something that is important is my radius is in the front here, and so my sketch plane has to be this back side, back over here. Okay. Now, again, some of this you're going to be like, oh, yeah, there's a lot similar to SolidWorks. So I'm going to turn my part around here, and I'm actually going to sketch on this plane right here, right? So I could go in again, sketch, but I know that I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to hit extrude. Extrude wants me to place my sketch plane. So I'm going to click right here. And that's it. Okay. And it orients it for me. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my half circle here right on this corner. And the reason I know that, now if you want to check where is that radius, if I go like this, I have to be in this corner right here, this kind of bottom right hand side. Now to go back to the sketch view so that I'm straight on, I can just hit that icon right there on my toolbar. All right. All right, so now I am ready to put that kind of half circle upright ear. We're going to call it an ear. That sounds like official. So I'm going to do a rectangle to start off with, and I'm going to grab this little corner right here of that block, so the top of it, and I'm just going to make it about that wide. And then I'm going to hit my middle mouse button, and then I'm going to move my dimensions out and down. Now I'm going to look. The size of this is going to be, the height is going to be 1 inch. So this height dimension of my rectangle is going to be 1. And then the width is going to be 2. It's going to be 2. Because the radius on the top there is 1 inch. Okay, so now if I kind of go to the side here, you can kind of see I'm on my sketch plane and I've just created just that portion of it, that part of the profile. I'm going to go back to the sketch plane. Now I'm going to add the radius on the top. And I'm going to do that by drawing a circle and then getting rid of the parts I don't need. Now I'm going to go circle, and I'm going to go along this line, and it's going to snap to that midpoint when I get close to it. I want that. So I'm going to click it, and then I'm going to go out to the end point of my rectangle, and I want to click that. And then it makes that coincidence. So I'm going to middle mouse button. And that way, when I make it wider or shorter, that radius is going to go along with it. Okay? Now I can get rid of those if I don't want them, right? But in this case, I would want that to go along with it. Then my next step is going to be getting rid of this line right here, and then the two portions of the circle that I don't need. So I'm going to do delete segment. Click. Now with delete segment, you can either individually click on them, or you can do that drag line and then go over the top. Either way. So here's an individual click. It gets rid of the whole thing. Here's the drag. And then drag. And it's going to go only like in between the parts, you know, like to an intersection point. Okay, so that is my full upright. So I'm going to hit middle mouse button to get out of there. Now, you have to be sure that you have a closed loop here. And that's, you know, you're closed when this turns pink. Okay. And then my dimensions here are also, they're also black. So I'm fully defined. All right. Now, you'll notice that my green check mark comes back. So if I wanted to, I can do my extrude right away. I'm going to do my feature requirements, and I'm checked off, so I'm good to go. And as I just kind of rotate this before I hit the green check mark, so notice that I've got my sketch here on that plane ready now to be extruded. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hit the OK button here. All right. And you'll notice that it's going to make an assumption. It's going to want to go in that direction, and I don't want it that way. So first and foremost, I can toggle it backwards. It's also going to assume that whatever my depth was, it's going to do this too, and I don't want it that deep. I'm looking here. I don't know if it gave me a dimension. We're going to go a 1/2 inch thick. So I'm going to go to right over here, my depth. It's in this direction, and I want this to be 0.5 enter. Okay, and there is my thickness. Okay, there's my thickness. Now I can, if I wanted to, now it will automatically like fuse those surfaces together. All right, so it recognizes that that's a continuous surface. I can take a look at it with my glasses to kind of preview it here. Okay, there we go. And I'm like, yep, it looks good. So there you go. Okay, now if you want to kind of get it in the center, here you are. And then kind of orient it. All right. Questions so far? So it's acting just like it did when you had maybe a previous parametric software like SolidWorks, right? But getting there, the interface is just a little bit different, right? And maybe the order of doing things or what they're calling things is slightly different. Okay. So now I've got a couple other features to put in here. The next feature that I'm going to add is we're going to add this radius, okay? And we're going to add that with a simple fillet, okay? So you'll notice we're here. We're now going to add our radius, and we're going to do that as a fillet. Now, we're going to do it as a fillet on the feature, okay, on the actual solid part. So you'll notice here when I'm out in my model ribbon, I do have the ability to put in a fillet, but over here they don't call it a fillet, they call it a round. They call it fillet in the sketch mode, but over here in the model ribbon they call it a round. If you arrow down here, they have an auto round and they have a round. We're just going to use the regular round. Bless you. Okay, now we are going to select the intersection where we want it to be. So you're not going to select two lines. You're going to select the intersection. So we're going to go right there is going to be my intersection. Now, it's going to automatically fill in with its defaults, okay? That's not quite big enough, but the way that it's setting it up looks good, okay? So it looks good and it's on the surface that I need it to be on. But now my dimension is going to be that radius, I think it's 1 inch. 1 inch radius, yes. Now, once that looks good to us, we could preview it, or you can just be like, yep, I'm good. I can hit the OK and it's in place for me. Okay, so that's a fillet command. And you can put fillets in, you know, a lot of different areas too and change the dimension and such. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a hole down in this base right here. Okay, hole right there. Now, on the model ribbon, they do have a hole command. Okay, so I'm going to hit it. I'm not going to go into the sketch mode. You could go into sketch and you could create that circle. You could dimension it. Okay, but this is just a little bit more efficient way to get at a hole. So you really do either one. Kind of like SolidWorks. We could do that very same thing in SolidWorks. And I actually think this hole wizard, if you would, works a little better than SolidWorks. I think SolidWorks is a little clunky sometimes. And sometimes just putting it in and generating it by hand, almost easier, right? At times, depending. So we're going to use this hole command on the model ribbon. And then we've got a number of different options here. This is just going to be a simple through hole. And when I look at the depth here, I could set the depth to a 1/2 inch, which is the thickness. But if I ever have the option to change that depth and it gets thicker, there's a good chance that type of a hole I'm going to want to go through all the time. So in this depth, you're going to notice that we have an option of through all. So we're going to do the through all, and then we're going to place the hole. I'm just going to click right here. I'm going to click it. Now, there's a diameter that they have in there as a default value. We're going to put in, I don't know if it even tells me, we're going to put in a 1/2 inch, okay? So up here is where the diameter size is, up on the top there, or you can click it directly in the sketch here, which is actually probably more efficient, so I'm going to do it there. Double click on it, 1/2 inch, enter. Now, you'll notice that we have these broken diamonds. And these broken diamonds are going from the center, and they want us to establish where are we locating from, okay? So I'm going to take this first broken diamond, and I'm going to go to an edge, and I'm going to dimension it off of this edge. And then I can double click on that, and I can give it a dimension. I'm going to say 1 inch, okay? Then I'm going to do the other one. This one is broken as well. When it gets to the edge, notice it becomes a closed diamond then. So now it's together. And that dimension is going to also be 1 inch. Okay, there we go. Now, once we have it placed and it looks good and it's going all the way through, we could, you know, take a preview of it, or we can just say, okay, looks good. Now, there are other things you can do there. So all the little boxes that are in there, we'll get to as we move along. You can create countersunk holes, counterbore holes. You can create threaded holes in there. So we'll play with that a little bit later, but just the basic through hole, we'll just go with the defaults and like that. Let's put another hole in, okay? We're gonna do it up here. So I'm gonna do the hole command again off of the model ribbon. I'm gonna place it sort of in the center here, okay? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that my depth is not to a number, but it's gonna be through all. And then I'm gonna get my broken triangles. Or broken diamonds. I'm going to put it to the edge over here. And that dimension is going to be 1 inch. And then I'm going to do this one to the bottom. And we're going to call that, I think that's 1 inch as well. Let's see. Click, 1 inch. Yeah. So notice that the dimensions themselves are black, and that the diamonds now are complete and closed. They're not broken anymore, right? Now, if I wanted to, I could do that preview, make sure it's doing what I want it to do. It looks great. And then I can have to hit the official OK. All right. So that is kind of a glimpse at doing extrusions. So again, functionality-wise, it's very similar to SolidWorks. Interface-wise, looks a little different, okay? But it's a parametric software, so you're expecting it to kind of do those basic things. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into your workbook here, okay, and kind of catch us up. So we're on, if you would, page 77. So we walked through creating this block up to that point, okay? And then they're going to go a little bit further with this. I'm gonna stop here today. I wanted to just kind of give you a glimpse at extrusions. So I'm going to stop my demonstration there today. What I'd like you to do is to turn the page a couple times, okay? And starting on page 81, this is the first tutorial. And this is a tutorial for this support jig right here, okay? So it walks you through creating just this part, not the tube portion, but it's a support jig right here. Very simple part, but it has you go through and make some changes, open up some menus, and go through a process. And in this tutorial, they're giving you step by step by step exactly what you're going to see. Okay, so this is a tutorial. I want you to go through step by step by step, and there's 55 steps, believe it or not. Okay, and again, they're having you practice with Zoom and the different ways that we can see the model with no hidden lines. So it gives you a little bit more of that in-depth environment testing ability through this. Okay, so now you're going to go through and you go all the way to page 92. Step 55. At this point, you're going to have a block that looks like this. Very simple, okay? But you learn a lot along the way about zooming and about vision and about all the different viewports and stuff that you can have. So I want you to go through that tutorial. Now, that is one of the tutorials. You'll take a screen snip or a snag of this when you're done, okay? So that's the first tutorial. Then you're going to continue on, and the next part you're going to create is going to be this tailstocks clamp, okay? And this one's a little bit more involved. This one, they're gonna be utilizing a function where you put the plane at the center of the part. So for instance, when you do your extrusion, you're going to extrude evenly on both sides of your sketch plane as opposed to being on one side or the other. We did that in SolidWorks too. When we saw kind of those axes of symmetry, this has an axis of symmetry right down the middle here. It also has an axis of symmetry here. And so you're going to see how you can use the software to kind of help you to use that to your advantage. Okay, so this is a nice tutorial as well. And this one goes to 103, goes to page 104. Okay, and there's 76 steps with that one. That's the tailstock clamp. So before you jump into any of the homework problems, and remember this time our LP3 homework problems are on a handout, okay? Similar to some of the problems at the end of the chapter here, but we're gonna go with the ones that were in the previous edition of the book. So I have this handout for you. And then if you get beyond the tutorial and you're, you know, and you wanna just kind of keep moving along, I do have out in Blackboard, in my lecture videos, you're going to notice that I have demonstrations for the problems. So problem 4.1 corresponds to the handout. If you look to problem 4.1 at the end of the chapter, that is not going to be the piece that's there. Hence the reason for the handout. So this one is 4.1. It's going to be the first demo there. The second one is going to be 4.2, then 4.4, and so on. So you have demos on all 6 of these problems, okay? If you need it. I challenge you, I encourage you to kind of peck around and, you know, try a little bit after you've gone through the good tutorials. Again, you're gonna be eager to maybe jump in and do things the way that you remember SolidWorks did it. And that's not gonna be the case. You're gonna get frustrated if you try to make it like, well, SolidWorks says it this way. And you're always gonna have an affinity for SolidWorks. If SolidWorks was the first one that you learned, it's gonna be the one you're gonna feel most comfortable with, and it's the one you're gonna compare all the rest of the softwares to. People who learn Creo first love Creo. People who learn SolidWorks first love SolidWorks, and they kind of like Creo. So just know that the whole purpose of this is to get you introduced to another software, and this is a very typical process that you'll go through because there might be companies out there that either use Creo or SolidWorks, or when you change jobs or versions update, you've got to be able to kind of go through that. So part of this class isn't so much getting to know SolidWorks so perfectly, but it's also working through that process of, kind of pecking around and kind of trying to figure things out yourself so that you can navigate and feel comfortable doing that in other softwares as well. All right, so I'm going to stop there with our first lecture today. The next time that we meet, we will look at questions that you may have on the tutorials. Okay, and I can do some demonstrations there as well. And then we'll get into looking at the problems. But again, if you want to start working ahead, you have resources out here to help you if you need them. All right, so that's all that I have for today. It's the start of our learning plan number 3. We will continue on the next time we're together. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.